There we are. Right. Welcome. So everybody, I just want to welcome you all and introduce you to Clare Emms. Clare and I somehow met through Instagram. It was Instagram, yes. And it's actually been the most interesting tale because after getting to know each other a little bit better, we discovered that we actually are from the same hometown. Clare released her book, it was last year. Yes, last year, which we'll chat about a little bit later. And when I was reading through Clare's book, I discovered that actually we had been to the same church. So when I was reading those, I could actually imagine myself in the church. I could feel what it felt like in the church. I could smell those smells. I could see the lights of the church. It was absolutely amazing. And then very recently discovered that Clare actually lives in the exact same road as my best friend from when I was growing up. So it just goes to show it is a crazy small world. And I'm super excited to have you here, Clare. How are you?
Thanks so much, Jacqui. Yeah, those coincidences are very strange. Yeah, even when you told me, I was like, what next? Like, what is our next link? Yeah. Yeah, but I'm well today. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. So what I have been doing is having a series of interviews with people who I think are spectacular and are women in business, but who also have, like we've obviously had communication backwards and forwards, and we've built a relationship. And so we've shared a lot, which I think is really, really great. So would you tell us a little bit about your story, about yourself and what you do? Because you do have quite a journey.
Yeah, it's always a difficult one to start because I never know where to start, but I'll keep it simple. Simply, so when I finished school, I went into teaching, and because I just loved working with children, and it gradually evolved. I said to a friend the other day, I was like, I'm always chopping and changing. She's like, not really. If you watch it, it's just been an evolution. And I was like, okay, yeah, I prefer that because it is like an evolution. So it went from the teaching, then I had my own 2 children. So I stayed at home to be mom while they were very little. And in that time, I found conscious parenting. So I was then running parenting workshops, coaching, and then that evolved into the inner child and reparenting, which became just so fascinating for me because it was just a natural progression. Like, I'm conscious parenting, I'm going to look at my kids. Oh, actually, it's more about me and my childhood and everything. And then that slowly progressed to more of the spiritual stuff. And then I wrote the book during that time, and now I'm doing more spiritual coaching, women's circles, and that's still evolving. There's still more to come. Yeah.
All of which is absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
So when we first had connected, you had transitioned from your teaching into your conscious parenting. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about particularly your conscious parenting? I know that you do still dabble in that a little bit. Like, why do you think it was important? What made you decide that that was something that was needed? If you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay. So it actually all started when I was like fresh out of school. I was watching Super Nanny on TV, and a friend of mine said this was also one of her things. And I realized the impact, the impact parents have on their children's lives. Like, I don't think I'd ever fully understood that. And even though I've gone a completely different route to Super Nanny, and I won't like name and shame her, but she does things very differently to what I do. But after learning what she did, I wanted to learn more about parenting so I could empower parents. And that's sort of where the journey took me. It was one of those, when you Google and then you Google again, and every day you seem to be Googling the same stuff. And I was like, you've got to do something with this, Clare. You can't just leave it. And then I found Positive Discipline and did their course. And it just also evolved as like naturally. And I looked at it today and I realized how often I would give people advice that did not ask me for it, because it was such a big passion of mine that I was giving people parenting advice everywhere I went. I was like at the moms and tots groups and the baby groups and dancing for my kid. And I was like, I must let more people know about this. And now, taking a big step back, I'm like, it's not really my place. But at the time it was like, it was everything to me. It's all I wanted to talk about. But yeah, I've gained a new understanding of working with those who actually want to work with me and feel that that's where they're called to work. But yeah, I hope that answered the question.
You're enthusiastic about it, and for good reasons.
Yeah.
And I think maybe particularly, I mean, from my background, I can definitely say this, like having been brought up in South Africa, which is still quite patriarchal and hierarchical, like conscious parenting seems to still be a relatively new thing here.
Yeah, definitely. It's not something that's well known. When you talk about it, people either they think they know what it is and they're using reward charts and sticker charts and positive reinforcement, or they have never heard of it, or they are doing it but they don't want to tell people because everybody judges them. Not everybody, that's generalizing, but yeah, it's not as common as we are hoping it will become. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
So I'm guessing that you then use the conscious parenting with your children, and how do you think that whole experience has been?
Yeah, it's been amazing because I only found it when my oldest is 5, my youngest is 3. I found it when my oldest was like 2. And my little one was born. So I'd already tried I'd smacked her a few times, which there's no shame in it, but I had no other tools. So I was shouting a lot. It was crazy. And I had no awareness of my own behavior. Yeah. It was like, I must control these children. They are my children to control. And through this journey with them, they are really my teachers. They're these little wise people that were born to teach me all this stuff. And every day I learned something from them. But yeah, I've seen so much of a shift from my childhood, although my parents were so actually really conscious in what they did, now that I can look back. But I can still see a difference in the progression from my childhood to now my kids, especially when it comes to speaking out about emotions and speaking out about just how they feel and when they're not comfortable. And I never felt like I could do that. So it's been empowering for me to watch that, and a little scary, because it's like, oh, they're doing that. Maybe they shouldn't be doing. No, they really must be doing that. Yeah, so that's been interesting.
I can absolutely attest to that. So the other day, my oldest, who is 11, him and his friend were chatting at school last week that they were organizing this whole thing to go watch a movie and all this sort of thing. And I was like, okay, well, that's great. I'll wait for his mom to phone me, which she never did. And so he came to me and he was like, well, Mom, why did you just phone her? And I had to have this moment where oh, that's rude. You can't just invite yourself. That was what was going on in my head. Versus but actually, why can't you just phone? It took me a few minutes to kind of go through witnessing what I was taught versus what I had been trying to teach him, and sort of feeling my stuff in between all of that. It was this weird moment. And luckily, he's also old enough that he was like, what's going on? I'm like, hang on, I'm just unpacking this a bit. It was weird.
That's so cool. And it's cool that he could be a part of that as well, the figuring out.
Well, exactly. So I explained to him, I was like, look, so when I grew up, you would never do that because that was rude, that was impolite. You couldn't just invite yourself. But why can't you just phone and say, hey, I heard that the boys were talking about this. Yeah. It was uncomfortable and weird, but as you say, also empowering.
Yeah, that's cool. And what ended up happening, if I can ask? Did you phone?
It was the funniest thing. So I was actually about to pick up my phone, and guess who phoned me? So
that's amazing.
It all worked out in the end, even though I did go through the process of feeling uncomfortable. It actually wasn't necessary, but maybe it was necessary.
It offered that opportunity anyway.
Yes, exactly. So it was a good learning curve for me, and he just got to witness it. Okay, so you were saying that from the conscious parenting, you then realized, exactly like we're just chatting about, how much of that is actually your own inner child work, that reparenting, all of that. Tell me a little bit more about how you shifted to that. When was the light bulb moment, and what does that look like? How does that look for you?
I almost feel like I didn't have a light bulb moment. It was also just it was like a nudge. The universe was nudging me and I wasn't listening. But I think the more I worked with parents and the more I tried to empower them, the more their stuff kept coming up. And I realized, well, in order to empower them first, let's unpack their stuff. But actually, before that happened, I started unpacking my own stuff, obviously. Otherwise, I don't think I would have acknowledged it. But it actually started with unpacking birth trauma, which was, I can't even remember how it happened. Something happened, and I just had this feeling like I need to go through my birth trauma.
Yeah.
And I remember it was around the time lockdown hit. Like it was that very, I guess it was like when it was bringing up a lot of emotions, a lot of anxieties. And I can't remember how it came to be, but I realized this is something I need to do. And when I started, I did like some meditations where I just sort of tried to revisit my birth and, you know, whether it was real or not, just try and bring up the feelings that could have been there. And I remember for a good like week, I was so teary and emotional, and it was just bringing up a lot. And then working through that and finding tools to work through it helped me keep working through things. And yeah, then I started identifying it more in the people I was working with. So,
yeah. And so then everyone that you have worked with, have they realized that shift, or were they putting their hands up to participate in the sort of reparenting journey? Have you made an actual distinction, or is it all just kind of all part of the package?
Sure, it's such a tough one. I do feel like it's just been, yeah, it's all just come with different people as well. Some people don't want to work on their own stuff. They just want the parenting tools. Some people, as soon as I start saying like, when we start working together, we may come up with, you know, some uncomfortable stuff, and we may work through some of your stuff, and they're like, oh, I think that's what I need to do actually. And then I go with their flow sort of. So yeah, wherever they're at is where I meet them.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And then from that, you've now progressed into hosting women's sacred circles and also that spiritual and intuitive coaching. So tell me a little bit more about that. What does it look like? How does it feel? How does it work?
I have no idea. No, I'm joking. That's how I feel sometimes. I just felt this calling to host circles, and I just was seeing it everywhere on social media, and it was just popping up, and something in me was like, what is this? What is this? What is this? I actually signed up for a course, but it ended up being exorbitantly expensive because it was overseas. And then I found a book that covered all the stuff in the course, and I bought the book, and I just sat and just like soaked in everything in this book. And I was like, this is something I'm meant to be doing, because I had shifted from that, as I mentioned earlier, that wanting to give people advice all the time. I had shifted into that space of, I need to help people find their inner wisdom, because I've found so much value in finding my own inner wisdom. And from there, I realized that's where circles can meet people at, can show them like, you can come here and it can be completely non-judgmental, and there's no pressure to share, and there's no pressure to hear advice from somebody, and you're not going to be triggered, because you may still find yourself triggered, but nobody's going to tell you what to do or what to say or what you should have done better or different. And then through that process, even while I'm running circles, stuff keeps coming up, because my background is very much music and dance and movement, and I've sort of put that in a box for whatever reason. I'm still working through that, but that's going to start coming into my circles now, because I realize that is my connection to everything, my own intuition and the spiritual realm and everything. So that's hopefully going to be the path that I'm going down with my circles.
That's really, really exciting. Like for me, I love sacred circles because, as you say, it's a safe space. But also often when you do share something, you suddenly find out that like everyone in the circle has the same thing or has been there and done that. And it's like, oh, it's not just me. And that is such an amazing feeling. It like almost takes some of the burden away, some of the pressure away, to realize that you're not by yourself.
Yeah. And don't you also find that the group of people who happen to come together were kind of meant to be there because of this thread that runs between you? Like you start talking, you're like, oh, that's why we're all here at the same time, thinking we're all on the same sort of journey or whatever it is. That's what I've found anyway.
Oh no, absolutely, yes. And that also, like, it's been an interesting thing that I've had from some of my workshops, and I'm sure, like, so picking up from what you've said, like, through this lockdown, a lot of people have made their circles smaller, and what's actually ended up happening is that they've actually almost lost I want to say gal pals, for lack of a better word, but those people who they need, like their sisterhood, their tribe, because they've been sort of like, okay, well, let's be careful about who we interact with. And suddenly they've come out the other side and they're like untethered, they're lost. And that's because they don't have that. And women need other women. Like we need each other to support each other. Like I said, that like whole sisterhood vibe, the whole red tent vibe type of thing. And I think a lot of people have lost that during lockdown. I think it's so important and like so amazing that you're introducing it back and getting people inviting them into that space again where it is safe and they can feel held and heal at the same time.
Thanks. Can I add something to that? Actually, while you were saying that, I also feel like a lot of people realized stuff. Like I realized like maybe I don't really belong in my church group anymore. Maybe I don't really not belong. Maybe I've found new ways of doing things, and even in friendship circles or acquaintance circles, whatever you want to call it, I had moved away and my mindset shifted and my life has shifted and my purpose has shifted. And I felt like and still feel like a different person coming out of that whole pandemic palaver. And now it's like I am craving that connection with more like-minded people that I no longer I don't have a lot of those connections, and finding them again has been so great. And the more I find them, the more I find them. It's like the more I allow myself to find them, the more I find them. Does that make sense?
It's so interesting that you say that. One of the Facebook groups I'm on, they were like, oh no, so when you find your tribe, like you'll find that it's actually a very small group of people. I'm like, oh no, like it starts off small, but then suddenly like that little group introduces you to more and more, and suddenly you've got this amazing network of people who are all, and maybe not like-minded, but who are open-minded enough that if you guys do have a challenging conversation, you can both leave having learned from that conversation, which I think is super exciting.
Yeah, amazing.
Okie dokes, your book. So it is called Changing My Beliefs and Changing My Life. Tell me how it came about that you decided to write this book and on this particular topic as well.
Oh, wow. I feel like it was something that was always in me. Like I wrote a lot as a child and I was always saying, I'm going to write a book one day. And I used to write these little books. And then I had tons of books that I'd written and stories and short stories. I remember even in my last year of teaching, sitting at the laptop and the kids were working and I was supposed to be working and marking and watching them. And I was writing a book because it was just in me to write. And then I had my kids and I never got onto it. And again, the lockdown hit. Like that was just the start of so much for so many people, but it gave me time. And that's all I needed. Well, not all I needed, but it was part of the puzzle. Yeah. The time gave me the opportunity to meditate more. It gave me the opportunity to connect more with God and my guides. And I was introduced to this new sort of spiritual world, being on an online spiritual group of people. And then I just started feeling this overwhelming feeling like, write the book. What are you waiting for? And it was hard because there was just so much in it that I didn't necessarily want to write, but I did write. And once it just started flowing, it was almost like working through my own stuff, while writing the book. And there's still stuff to work through, but I think that was it. It was this overwhelming sense of like, write the book.
So just to give listeners a bit of an idea, the book is all about limiting beliefs and how Clare has worked through a lot of these. So she uses quite a few examples in the book, and it's actually really well. I love the way you structured the book because it actually takes us on a journey from, I want to say, a bit more superficial into like some really deep stuff. So that kind of brings me on to my next question. So in the book, you are so vulnerable. You share some really personal aspects of your life. How did your family feel about this? How did you feel about it? And how were you so brave, not only to share it with your family, because I'm assuming that they got it first, but then also sharing it with, please.
Sure, that's actually one of the biggest, that was the biggest part of writing the book that I hadn't taken into consideration. I had and I hadn't. I was so focused on the book and finding the perfect editor, and because I self-published, I did the whole route and found people, and I was so in that zone that when it came time to publish, it was like, oh, people are going to read this now. So I'd given it to my mom to read. I told my dad that he could read portions of it. I'm like, please don't read the whole thing. There's stuff I don't want you to read. I think he probably still read it. And yeah, the feedback was mixed. Like, I remember sitting with my mom and she said something and she was like, oh, I saw that in the book. Or I said to her, sorry, I said to her, did you see that in the book? And she said, oh, I finished it. And I said, but you didn't tell me that you finished it. And I could see she was just like, yeah, I don't want to talk about this. And I was like, oh no. And I was really upset, and it was a good opportunity to sit and talk. And I just said to her, like, I know I mentioned you a lot and I'm sorry, but I had to, because if I didn't mention people, the story would have no story. Yes. I didn't do things on my own. Everything I did, especially childhood, most of it, my mom was the central figure. And I think the way I tried to do it was to sort of say how, I mean, my mom is amazing. I love my mom so much. She's like my best friend. Yeah. But there are things that I wish could have been different. And that was hard for her to hear, because she put so much effort into our childhood. And now it was like me turning around saying, well, all of that was crap, even though that isn't what the intention was. But I think it's taken time. I even sat in her, I went to her retired women's craft group yesterday, and I was the only youngster, if I can call myself that. And one of the ladies said, tell us more about this book. And I was just quiet. And I said, well, it can be fairly controversial. And the one lady said, I know, that's why I read it, because your mother was upset. So I got the book and I read the whole thing. We had a bit of a laugh, but at least you can laugh about it now. But yeah, I suppose to sum up, it was really difficult. I still have struggles, because like my cousin bought the book. He came to the book launch. He's like 3-4 years older than me. I don't necessarily share my life stories with him. Like, he's my cousin. And then I saw the order come through and I'm like, oh. So I sent him a message. I'm like, you can't read my book. I'm like, there's stuff in there I don't want you to read. He's like, I don't mind, it's fine. And I was like, But then I had to also work through that and let it go and be like, people are going to read it. And that was the whole point. So,
oh, I do love it. I have to admit, when I was reading through it, I was like, oh, I don't know if I could write something so vulnerable and so honest and give it to my parents to read. Like, I think I'd change my name and leave the country, kind of thing.
I was tempted, I'll admit.
And like I said, I mean, love my parents did, but hugely grateful for everything they've done. But I'm like, I don't know if they would understand evolution, but it is what it is. So I am in awe of the bravery, the courage that you found to publish your book.
Thank you.
Not just to publish it, but to publish such personal stories as well.
Thank you.
I think makes the book that much more meaningful, that much more special.
Yeah, I think I knew I had to get the message across. I couldn't water it down.
So, trick question, put you on the spot. What is your favorite chapter of the book?
It's such a hard one. I've thought of this so much as well, because I love all of them for different reasons. But I think my favorite chapter would be it always pops out, the one about friendships, because I had such a weird, not weird, but such a long journey with friendships. Yeah. So from like being a kid who made friends really easily to landing in situations of bullying and feeling like I didn't know how I got there, to coming out of school and then having really solid friendships and still trying to make friendships. It was so messy, to now being who I am and realizing that I had no clue about friendships. I was always looking for external validation and external praise. And when I started finding the value, and still on the journey of finding the value in myself, my friendships did shift and are still shifting. So I think that's my favorite one. And the chapter would probably be completely different now if I wrote it, because so much has even happened since then. Yeah.
No, which is true. I mean, also, like, we grow up learning certain things and mimicking from our parents, from those around us. And as you say, I'm going to say if you're lucky enough, because that's kind of how I feel, you come out the other side and like, those were some interesting choices I made. Like, what was that? So for me, I personally think my favorite chapter of your book is the one about how your relationship with God has changed. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that, like I said, I could actually picture myself sitting in the pew in the church. I know that smell, I know the lights, and it's because we had the same church, but also because I've had the same evolution where I went from being really good at going to church, and it was a whole family thing, to then being like, no, not doing this thing anymore. And now coming out the other side, said like, but there is a God, but it's different to how I was brought up, and that's okay. So I think, like, for me personally, that whole spiritual evolution is my favorite chapter.
And it's funny because that's also just evolving as I go as well. I found recently, coming out of COVID and everything, I don't go back to church. I'm searching for that space, but it's quite emotional because I want the connection and the community, but I don't know where I fit. And to feel like I don't fit where I fit for so long, it's so hard. But that's the second book. The second book is going to be about that journey. So
so that leads me to the next question. Complete.
Yeah, I don't feel like my book was ever complete, but it's something I've never put so much work into editing something in my whole life. I'm not that kind of person. Like my school assignments, I wrote them and I handed them in. I'm not a nitpicky person, if you want to call it that, or a precise person, but I had to be. And that was a good lesson because I sat and I sifted through. I would change words, like a word in a chapter. I was like, I know there's a word that I don't like in chapter 3 and I need to find it. And it was random. No one else would have noticed. But so I still don't feel like it's finished. I'm actually aiming to try. I should actually say it this way. I'm going to get it published through a publisher, but that's a path I'm on now because I would like it to reach more people and I can't do it on my own. So I'm realizing it's more than being vulnerable. It's also being practical and saying, I've got to maybe get some help. I don't think it's finished. But I'll add another book and finish that.
Like for me, the fact that you decided to go self-publishing and you even published actual hard copies of the book. It wasn't just an ebook. Like that was quite a thing, and you got someone who would do all your typesetting for you and who did your it was beautiful, and I'm sure it was a beautiful journey, but as you say, I'm sure also quite a steep learning curve.
Definitely.
Yeah. So in all of you for having done all of that as well, because I probably would have just gone, oh, ebook, done. Okay, so how do you deal with stress?
Sure. Stress for me it's something I didn't know I had. Like for a long time, I thought I was super chilled. And I would go to I remember going to a physio, and I went to the dentist and all these random people. And they're like, you're quite uptight. Like they would feel my jaw or do something. And I'm like, and it was always a trigger. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm super chilled. I am so chilled. And it took a really long time for me to realize that I was not a chilled person. I'm quite edgy, and it's just my personality. Like I feel emotions deeply and I feel everything deeply, and I am quite I get stressed easily actually, and when I started acknowledging that, I found coping skills that have helped, but they are also long term. So dealing with my emotions was a big one. Understanding my emotions was a big one. Understanding the concept of regulation, through parenting, and then realizing, oh, that's actually what I need to work on. So that's been big. And I think just things like meditation, yoga, awareness of, wow, I'm stressed right now. Let's take a step back. How did this happen? How did I get here? Where did this spiral start? That's been a big one, and it's helped so much.
I always say to all of my clients, awareness is always the first thing. When you've got that one, the rest is actually just building steps on top of that one.
Yeah.
And would you say that you've ever experienced burnout at all?
I don't think that I have, but I don't know. I've had moments where I probably was experiencing it, but maybe through the coping mechanisms I had at the time, it didn't sort of settle. I don't know if you can say that, but recently, probably last year, my nervous system was in a total state of stress. I'd been through a really stressful couple of months, and there were things happening that I felt were out of my control. And it took so much to take the control back. I don't even want to call it that, but to take my own power back. And that caused me so much stress. And coming out of the other side, I was edgy. I was losing it with everyone. I found myself driving fast, speaking fast, like my life felt fast.
Yeah.
And when I realized it, it took a lot to undo that. But I don't know if it was burnout, but I'm sure it was on its way to burnout or something similar.
Yeah. And in that, did you find that those like go-to tools, your yoga, your meditation, all that, were those the things that were helping you when you finally had that awareness, like, well, hang on, need to slow down, need to pause?
I think in that stage, what helped me more was like mindset work. So going to my coach, working through emotions, and like doing like the deep stuff that I wasn't doing. And at the time, I wasn't able to do my meditation and my yoga. It's like I couldn't even do it. I couldn't access that part of myself that wanted to do that because my nervous system was just like shut down. And once I worked through the deeper stuff, and I cried a million times with her, and I felt the anger. I remember her saying to me, "You're going to punch a pillow, and you're going to do it with me now, because otherwise you're not going to do it." And I actually forgot she was there at one point, because I had so much anger to release. Yeah. And it took time as well, but releasing all of that, and through that process, I was able to return to my meditation, my yoga. But it was a process, but it was an intentional process. Yeah. I had to put the work in. That was hard. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting that you say that, because like one of the things that I can remember clearly from my downward spiral to burnout was that I would pack my gym bag every day, and I'd put it in the back of my car, and then I'd come home and I'd take it out, and the next day I'd put it back. So I knew that like physical exercise was good for me, like so to the point that I was packing the gym bag, but I just wasn't taking that last step of actually getting in the gym. So I understand exactly what you're saying about being completely dysregulated, that even though you know those things are good for you, you just actually can't do them. Yeah.
No matter what you do, it's like there needs to be another step before that, or another process before that. Yeah.
And that's where that deep work actually comes in. Yeah, 100%. Okay. So what does it mean to you to live in your brilliance?
It's such a cool question. Even just as you said it, I was like, I can live in my brilliance. Yay, thanks for the permission. For me, living in my brilliance, it's all about authenticity. And authenticity for me has been unpacking the conditioning. Like I always feel like it's childhood conditioning, but I've got so much adult conditioning as well. It's just conditioning in all its forms, and it's always there. Like I think I've unpacked something, and then it comes back, and I think I've, like a recent one, I'll be vulnerable, but a recent one, I kind of felt like I'd tackled it. Like I don't need external validation. I can find it within. And then I've gone on a new spiral of needing external validation from people again. And I think it's shifting my work has led to that. But yeah, so what was the point of what I was going to say? Oh, but working through it to find my authenticity has, when I find it, I feel like I'm living in my brilliance.
Yeah.
But it's hard, sometimes hard to find, but maybe not as hard as I think.
I don't think it is unattainable.
Yeah. I think I need to give myself more permission, because even you giving me permission, well, me feeling like you gave me permission felt so good, but often I don't give myself that permission. So I think that's also a thank you for that. It's a good step.
But how crazy is it that we do that to ourselves? Like, why can we not live in our brilliance? But again, it is that whole like societal thing. Like, you can't do that. You might shine too bright. Like, who are you to be happy and stress-free when everyone else isn't? When actually, we're all actually entitled to that. We've just got ourselves into this quagmire.
Yeah. I always feel like, who am I to shine my light in people's eyes? I'm going to blind them. And then I'm like, no, maybe I'm going to just help their light to shine.
Yeah.
That's such a shift.
Yeah. Which is exactly what I love about like spiritual coaching and that type of work, is that it's not so much that you are healing someone, but you're actually just facilitating them to find themselves underneath all that baggage.
Yeah. And it's so amazing because it also takes the pressure off as a coach. It's like, I don't actually have to help this person. I just help guide them to their own brilliance, which is so cool.
Yeah. And they can go as deep or as shallow as what they want and as to what they're ready for at the same time.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So where can listeners find a copy of your book?
So they can look at my website. My new website is clareemms.me, because it's all about me.
I like that.
That's the learning to shine my light. It was also a tough one. I was like, I can't have my website being my own name. That's so like, who am I? But it is my own name, and it has to be.
High five there.
Yeah. So it's on my website, and people that are living in South Africa can order a physical paperback copy.
Mm-hmm.
And then for those who want an ebook, they can go onto Amazon, just search Clare Emms, and it usually comes up because it's not a very common name. And there's also a paperback option for people around the world that aren't in South Africa. And it's on all the Amazons, which is quite cool. It goes on to like the UK and the US, and yeah, that was also a journey learning all of that. Mm-hmm.
Totally accessible, doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And where else can listeners find you?
Okay, so apart from the website, I really love Instagram. That's like my favorite place to be, as you know. And at the moment, it could always change. I am Clare Intuition. So Clare_Intuition.
Yeah. I just type in Clare Emms and I generally find you. It
just comes up. Yeah, that's true.
Any last bits and pieces that you want to share with us?
Sure. No, just thank you for having me on. When I had you on my podcast yonks ago, that's all fallen away. It's not something that I'm doing, but I love chatting like this. So thank you for giving me that opportunity, because it's been so great.
Yeah. Well, thank you for agreeing to be on my podcast, because for me, this is like super important to be able to, like I say, have these really awesome conversations with people who you might randomly seem to have connect with, and yet a relationship can grow out of what was just at one stage an Instagram connection. And you've had a beautiful journey, and I'm so chuffed to have been a part of it. So I'm very excited for you. I'm excited for your book being published. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed reading it. In fact, it is on my list of recommended reads for all my clients.
Oh, thank you.
Well, yeah, because you're, like I say, you're so vulnerable in it. I think that anyone can learn from that, which is really great. And I mean, limiting beliefs are something that we often don't even realize they're there until someone puts the mirror up. And I feel like your book puts the mirror up for you to then go back and have a look and reassess your own limiting beliefs. So that's why it's on my recommended reading list.
And can I add to that, as somebody, I felt like you helped me a lot with my beliefs. Like, I think I still asked you once, like when we first met, like, how do I work on limiting beliefs? Like, how weird is that? To now, where my book's about limiting beliefs. So you've definitely been a part of that journey. And I'm so happy to have had support from you along the way, like as a friend and an Instagram person and a fellow coach. So thank you.
And the fact that we come from the same town too.
Oh yeah, wow.
Crazy small world that we live in. Thank you very much for this time. I've really enjoyed this chat, and we will put all of your details into the notes of the podcast so everyone can find you super easy through those.
Thank you so much. It's been really great.
You are a superstar.